All right, we're back. Thank you very much for joining with us. We break at the half hour there for commercial breaks on the radio broadcasting, but also in addition to that, it makes it a little easier for folks on YouTube to be able to understand, and just kind of, it gives them a chance to take a break, go have a cup of coffee, or get up and use the bathroom or whatever. Okay, I want to talk about a couple of other topics related to leadership and our relationships with each other as leaders, and your relationship with those who you are proposing to lead, shall we say. We had there was an incident that occurred on a blog that I post on, and I put this up on our Facebook page because I wanted to make it very clear my position on this issue, and I want to make it clear in this post as well, or in this particular episode today. There are some folks who disagreed with a comment from a student, and this was a high school student that was a member of the blog and the community and so forth. They were pretty condescending in their comments and very harsh, I felt. And what bothered me about it was what I expect from a leader is I expect a leader to recognize a teachable moment when they see one. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, those folks that answered inappropriately should have utilized the critical thinking skills that they have, and they should be practicing and exercising them, to recognize that this particular student was responding to something and quoted a teacher. Well, right off the bat, that tells you, the word teacher tells you that that's a student. It also immediately tells me a couple of things. And, this isn't rocket science, and this isn't psychology 101. I mean, if it's a student and they are being taught in school, that tells me that they are relatively young and relatively inexperienced in life, and they may not have the benefit, the knowledge, the wisdom, and the experiences that we have had over the course of our lives. They don't necessarily remember what it was like to live beforehand in the pre-Obama era or the pre-tyranny era of Bush. Yes, you heard me right. Bush was a tyrant. Bush was a traitor too. Make no mistake about it, folks. Both Bushes and Clinton. This is going back beyond even my years of recognition and acknowledgement. So, when someone says, or in this case, when the comment was, so this is something my teacher said, that tells me a couple of things. One, this is someone who's youthful. Two, youth generally means a level of inexperience. But more importantly, what really bothered me about it was I recognized it for what it was. It was a tenuous first reach. It was like that first, you ever try to hold out a nut and get a squirrel to come up to you to feed it? And it's nervous and it's scared and it's tenuous. It wants it, but it needs it, but it just is scared. Or it's outside of its experience. Well, instead of taking that and running with that ball and using that as an opportunity to polish a brilliant young mind, some individuals were what I felt was harsh. Now, maybe I'm overreacting, but what's important is that I want you to recognize that this is something that's very, very common, especially on the internet, because everyone feels like their input on the internet is anonymous. And for whatever reason, it makes us, we can't necessarily always express in words, written word, what in some cases we're actually thinking. And the reason I say that is because it's been our experience that oftentimes people will say something or do something and will respond, with a flippant comment. And we don't mean it to come out harsh, but because, we're not really expressing ourselves fully, your one sentence may come across sounding mean. And what that does is it disturbs, and for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, it injures the potential growth of that relationship. So here's a student who is youthful and has less experience and is therefore not necessarily as open and as knowledgeable as you may be. And instead of turning around and slamming that, the right approach would have been to say, this person is probably being bombarded by propaganda every single day. And as a result of that, I applaud their courage for reaching outside of what they're being told and seeking for truth. That's what brought you here, isn't it? So don't we then have an obligation to be an educator, a leader? Don't we then have an opportunity to make that into a teachable moment? I hate those kind of, phrases. But, what I said here is, I understand that when things are as bad as they are, that emotions run high. But we have enough divisiveness being fostered upon us from the left, and we don't need to divide ourselves. Especially when someone has come here with the intention of finding a view that they don't get during their programming by the mainstream media, their manipulation within the system, government, schools, whatever news media they capture, peer pressure, and everything else. We bring them into our understanding, and we play the role differently. We don't send them away packing, embarrassed, hurt, and feeling like you would feel if you posted a comment on a liberal blog. Bashed. You haven't accomplished anything. You just lost a patriot. And God knows we need him now. I expect those of you who are friends of this program, listeners to this program, readers on our Facebook page, readers on our blog and on our website, watchers of this on YouTube, I expect that you're going to conduct yourself as a teacher and as a leader. We're not a mob here. What we are people who will understand when someone approaches us seeking knowledge, and we will take that and say, great, let's have an open public discourse or an open discourse about it. If you walked into a church and you went up to a minister or a pastor or a priest or an imam or a rabbi, and you said, I have my doubts about religion, but I'm here because I'm seeking an answer, and you're the logical shepherd, so tell me why I should believe what you believe. If you, as that leader or that shepherd, turned around and insulted that person or made them feel like their opinions or their own thoughts were silly or foolish, you wouldn't really achieve the goal of, one, what you're supposed to be doing, and two, you would have left them without an answer to their question. In fact, you would have hardened their position against your position. You completely defeated yourself. And by extension, you've defeated all of us. As leaders, it's our obligation to take a moment before we respond and think about what we're about to say. I'm going to give you an example. When you hear someone on an interview in a news environment or in a political environment, or even on C-SPAN, when you're hearing someone being questioned by Congress, watch a television program where they're showing you a live trial or something like that. People who are good communicators will do one thing, and they will do it virtually every time. Given a question, they pause. And they pause for a second before they respond. And there's a reason for that. There's an old phrase I remember from when I was in high school. And, it's called engage your brain before putting your mouth in gear. And why they pause is they give themselves a second to think of that first immediate response that just jumps right into your mind. And then they temper it. And they say, and this can happen in milliseconds, folks. I mean, our brains work are incredible. And so they then at that point say, okay, is this the right thing to say? Or should I jump back to my talking points? Or can I make a point here that will help win them to my thinking? That's your job. That's the role you play. That's why you're here. Not just to learn, but to learn how to translate that learning to others. We are teachers. But we're more than just teachers. We are preachers. Why do I say preachers? And I don't mean in a religious sense, but I do mean the religious analogy. The difference between a teacher and a preacher should be clear and stark to everyone who's using critical thinking skills. A teacher is intended to give all viewpoints and allow a student to draw their own conclusions. A preacher, on the other hand, is not really looking to give both viewpoints. They are looking to win you to their way of thinking. And we're both. And the difference is stark. It's obvious as black and white, as two sides of a coin. As teachers, we're to accept and recognize and respect the opinion that whomever we're dealing with comes to us with, and then provide them the other side of the viewpoint so that they can understand why you believe what you believe. As preachers, you have to know your subject matter good enough that you can win them over. We want them to see both sides, because if there's one thing that I personally, and I'm sure this applies to you as well if you think about it for a moment, if there's one thing I can't stand, it's when someone is so ideologically rooted in their own Kool-Aid thinking that no matter how much logic, no matter how much reason, no matter how much compassion, no matter how much intelligence you put before them, they refuse to see and or accept the truth. That drives me crazy, because it tells me that that person is not salvageable to my or in terms of what I can expect from them. I can't save them from themselves. I can't save them from seeing or from assisting and participating in the degradation of our nation. And at that point, I'm going to take my tools, my kit bag, my skills, my knowledge, my wisdom, and I'm going to apply it in a more fruitful place. I'm not going to water and feed a dead tree. And you shouldn't either. There are conversations that you just can't win. There are people who are so staunchly positioned that they're unwilling to see the intelligence, the logic, the reason, the brilliance, the brightness, the awakening that's in front of them. And you need to know when that happens and either cut bait and walk away or continue to fish and try to reel that fish in. You know, it's so important that we actually look at this from the right standpoint, that I can't express or impress upon you the real true importance of this. I don't want anybody to feel like, I'm trying to stifle their viewpoint or their thinking or anything along those lines. We all have an opportunity to express ourselves. And I don't want anybody to get, hurt feelings about it and say, I get defensive, right? Because y'all know me better than that. I would never tolerate somebody saying to me, you're censored and for this reason. I would never accept that, not in a million years. I would continue to do what I do anyway. And if I couldn't do it there, I'd do it somewhere else. But I also know that there are times where you're better off approaching it from a different perspective. That you're better off with an approach that is softer rather than steely and hard. And when you're talking about someone who might not necessarily be as advanced as you are in terms of seeing what our plight is, it's our job and our role and our function to make sure that we bring those people back in. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this. We, as leaders and teachers, we as teachers and preachers should temper our steel and sharpen it with an equal mix of intelligence and compassion and understanding of where they're coming from. The most successful communicator will understand what the other person's motive is for thinking the way they think or for questioning what they're bringing up. And then they answer that and therefore give that person the assurance that you are offering something better than what they currently have in terms of a belief system. Does that make sense? Sometimes before we react, we should do what we see smart communicators do. First, we should pause. And we should make a determination, is it even worthwhile for us to react? Because if the person is inflexible and it's just vehement and it's just vitriol and they're just spewing hatred at you, then it's probably not worth reacting. Because, one, they're in an emotional lather and you're really not going to get anywhere. Two, that's usually fairly good evidence that that person is so set, so embedded in concrete up to their neck in their position that no matter how much logic and truth you put before them, they're never going to accept it. Because they've willed their mind shut. Shut to all opposing views. Shut to logic. Shut to reason. Shut to intelligence. They have become intellectually dishonest with themselves. And the reason that they're intellectually dishonest is because they're not allowing or willing to allow their mind to accept and analyze another viewpoint. That's dangerous. Ideologues are dangerous people on either side of the fence. Never be one of those. If the person is worthy of the response, then the next question is my response going to elevate them or push them away? Is my response going to draw them in further for a second question? Or is my response going to push them back? If it's going to push them back, then think of another response. That's why you pause. Then you should ask yourself, what can I say or do in this instance that will answer the question and at the same time improve their understanding and help them to become even further awake? I do interviews on radio programs other than our, America's Voice Now all the time. I have a press agent who goes out and books me on radio programs. I do probably half a dozen to a dozen a week. It depends on, what's going on in the news and how busy they are. Every opportunity, and the reason I do that, and I pay this person out of my pocket. I pay this publicist. And the reason I do that is because it gives me an opportunity to let other people who ordinarily would not hear my views to hear them, and maybe some of those seeds planted will grow and mature. Never water and feed a dead tree, but always be willing to water the seed, because there's an opportunity to influence and mold that seed and bring it to maturity and fruition to the point where it can actually deliver fruit. You've heard me use this analogy before. Somebody somewhere got to this little kid. His name was Billy Graham. And forget the religious aspect of this for a moment, but recognize this. Somebody got to him, answered his questions in a way which he could accept and understand, and he believed. He then went on to take his ability to communicate and literally leverage that into how many tens of millions of believers. We don't know who our message touches, and we don't know who it resonates with. But that means that we should walk around everywhere that we go, in every contact and communication that we have, making sure that we are setting an example that others can see and confidently look up to and follow. That's our role as leaders. I encourage you to please be cognizant of that. Think about it. Write it down. Work out and go through the thinking process that says, I want to be a better leader and I'm going to learn how to do it. Sometimes you don't do this publicly. Sometimes you pull that person aside, because for them to change their opinion means they've got to lose face. And it also means that they've got to admit that for all these years, they've been wrong. And that, folks, is one of the hardest things that human beings can ever do. Admit they've been wrong. It's a universal problem. Everyone has it. Please be aware and cognizant of it so that you can guard against offending someone, so that you can guard against putting them in a position of defensive or a defensive position where they feel like they now have to descend into what? Emotionalism. There's nothing wrong with emotion, but it shouldn't be the only guiding force that molds and shapes your political and your life thinking. Emotion has a place, but it can't be. It also must be tempered with logic and reason. Logic and reason must be tempered with compassion and emotion. You hear me get livid all the time. There's nothing wrong with righteous anger. There's nothing wrong with making a joke. Just be cognizant about how that's perceived by others, and are you off-putting them, or are you alienating them? If you're alienating them, or you're making them lose face in a public environment, you will lose them every single time, without fail. Our job is to step above that. And our job is to recognize it when it's going to happen. As leaders and teachers, our role is to help and shepherd, to focus their attention and their thinking, to direct, educate, inform, motivate, and activate them. And we're going to accomplish this best by using our critical thinking skills, acting and operating and responding appropriately, and by never putting someone in a position where we force them to publicly lose face. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Thank you very much for being with us today. I appreciate it. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll hit on some news stories. That's enough of my teaching for the day. But I want you to be cognizant of it. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ America's Voice Now. You can read the article I put up there. You can also find us at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. Take this and the previous video and share them with some friends. Maybe they'll learn something. And then find us at americasvoicenow.org. We'll be right back.